So today is the final touches for my Jack Skelington doll. So first of all, just using my picture, I looked at how I wanted his new tailcoat to be, and not a seamstress, but I'm just sketching something roughly onto a piece of paper so I get the right sizes. So I'm going to be using pre-felt black merino fleece, which is the same as what I've used for the black on him. So I only really need to make the coat where it's not touching his body. Like, I don't need to make the back of his coat, so I just do the tails and then the lapels, which, yeah, this looks totally bonkers, but as you'll see, it does work out in the end. So the tailcoat has a big split up the back, a kind of claw hammer jacket, I think these are, with 3 spikes down at each side piece. Just sketching it in really roughly because it's much easier to shape things with a pre-felt once you're done. So this looks like the most bizarre, I don't know, it's like almost a wings kit. So just making these 2 lapels, sort of dungarees, and then just cutting it out of the paper, and I'm gonna check that the sizes kind of fit, because obviously if it's too small then it's better to find that out just now than when we're with the pre-felt. So just popping it onto my Jack doll, and as you can see, that's going to fit around his middle. It's kind of about the right length, and the lapels look like they'll go all up his front and then right round up to his, meeting at the back of his neck at least. So that looks perfect. So onto the black merino pre-felt. I get this from Wilder Wool, and just cutting my little pattern out, like I say, not a seamstress, and popping this onto Jack's body. The really good thing with this pre-felt is it's not fully felted, so there's quite a lot of manipulation you can do with it, but it just saves you so much time. In the past, I've made my fabrics by needle felting flat pieces of fabric, and that takes forever and a lot of finger stabbing. So this way you've got 3/4 of the work done. You just cut out the shape, popping it on his body and making sure it's fitted very tightly over his waist, because he has a very skinny waist. Snipping the back of the lapels so they meet just at the back of his head. So basically the black that I've already felted in is the bodice of his jacket, and this is just the lapels and the collar and the tails of his jacket. So felting everything in place, bearing that in mind. If you pinch it nice and tight at his waist, then it does flare out a little bit further down. Look at that figure. And as I manipulate him about, I see that there's a few patches that weren't covered with the black, so I just add in some more fleece there, and then cutting out the 3 points at each of his tails on his coat. So just cutting them, just eyeballing that, not following the pattern. But yeah, just cutting them out into little triangle, little points pointing down the way. And that, I mean, you're almost done with the coat, but the magic of this pre-felt is if you hold the tails of his coat in the position you want them to sit, you can felt that and sort of sculpt them into a little more of a shape that you want. So definitely coming down, felting at the points of this coat so that they can hold their shape and they're nice and smooth. Holding it in the back just how I want it to sit, basically. So really careful, but between your fingers, just felting into the fabric of his coat while holding it just in the total shape that I want, and it really ends up giving a pretty cool shape. It looks like it's held out a little bit in the wind. Also, because the pre-felt is just pre-felt, it's not fully felted, it does need a little bit of felting just to make sure that it's got a bit more structure, because how you get it, it's soft enough that if you pulled at it, it would pull to pieces without too much pressure. So we don't want that, we want it reasonably well felted. I did initially, when I was thinking up this idea, think that I might want to put wire into the side of the coat and these little spikes at the bottom of the tails, but it held really well all by itself just with a little bit of felting, so there was no need to add anything extra there. If you're making this on a much larger scale, then you could possibly run just a small piece of wire down the edge of the coat, and this would let you manipulate the shape of the coat. But With this jack, it actually has worked pretty cool. It's holding itself pretty well, but take your time, go over the whole of your jack and felt them until you're happy with them. Make sure there's no white spots where you want it to be black and black spots where you want it to be white. Just always spend a good 20 minutes between every step just felting all over him to see what you're happy with if you need to do anything. But that is pretty much his tail coat done. Fairly simple, only took about half an hour to create, so not bad at all, and just finishes him off, makes him look a bit dapper. And here you can see just messing about with him. I was considering whether to stop at this stage because he didn't look too bad, but I decided that I do have to continue on and sort out his feet and his hands. Not too tricky for the feet because with the wire I've just folded over the bottom slightly so it's a kind of L shape for loops for the bottom of his feet. But I want to make kind of boots, and they're sort of almost childish like boots because it's a drawing. They don't look amazingly detailed, so I'm just felting 2 small squares that are going to be his heels, and that is it. Literally just carefully felt it into a square shape. Don't felt it too firmly because you're going to sculpt more when it's on the feet as normal, but trying to work on having squarer edges. You don't want a nice smooth rounded thing with this, nice square edges. And then you're going to want to make sure and felt 2 of these, obviously 1 for each foot, and then they're just going to be felted onto the foot. Feet can be really tricky to make, but if you're doing it from a cartoon, then we can, just like I've done here, just make them very simplistic. It's an L shape and a little square for his heel. Pretty similar if you were doing women's feet as well. That would just be the L shape, but just with a stiletto, just a pointed shape. Obviously, again, Jack's a drawing in this case. We're taking him from an animation. His feet are far too tiny and he's never going to be able to stand up by himself. So if you want him to stand for images or anything else, it's best to lean him against something. Give him a wee helping hand. Felt sculptures are so light that you can just literally just hold his hand on one fingertip of yours and he'll balance. They're so fantastically light, and that can make a really quite interesting picture to do it that way as well. It's actually a little bit fiddly to get the heel to stick on here, but I spent a good bit of time persevering, felting around from all directions just to make sure it's really nicely stuck on, and then obviously felting firmly on the other one, and that's his feet done. And then the very last thing that I've been putting off all the time is his hands. Now you could make hands do the fingers just by using the glue stick and wrapping wire into hands. The fingers rather like what I did with the frog. I also have a needle felting hands video, which I'll link to in the cards up above, that you could do this way. With this one I couldn't quite do it that way because there's a wire so far into the hands. I was undecided what I was doing before this point, so to keep with the cartoony feel, I'm just felting in 2 little strips of black to separate him into 3 fingers. I know it's 4 fingers and a thumb on a hand, but in cartoony things, in sculptures, that just makes them a bit too banana-y like. So I'm trying to keep his hands as thin as possible and just put this thin strip of black in between the fingers, in between where the fingers are going to go, and this just gives an idea, a suggestion of the hand. But if you want to go more detailed, or very much if you're doing a larger sculpture, then very much go with the individual fingers or my hand video. And then the final piece is a thumb, so it's a tiny piece of fleece. I'm just going to wind it tightly round my needle, and then once I'm happy with the size of that, just break it off, slide it off the needle, and then felt nice and firmly onto the hand. And just look at where your thumb attaches to your hand. It's very low down in the palm of the hand, so make sure and attach the hand really low down. And the other thing to be thinking about is where your thumb is when your hands are like this. It can be getting confusing, so quite often when I'm doing drawings or making sculptures, I'll sit and I'll kind of hold my arm up and go, alright, if my arm's up when my palms are down, then my thumbs are forward. And there you go, that's your Jack. Obviously you make the two hands, but that's your Jack sculpture. And for those of you that was following along yesterday with my felt along making a dog, I just wanted to show you at the stage I was at with him as well. He's getting along pretty cool. I just added a head to him with just my simple closed mouth dog head tutorial. It's just a ball and a tube really. So that's where we've got to with him. I've got to make some curls, add some facial features, but he's actually really nearly there. So thank you so much to everyone who joined in with me for that felting video yesterday. Okay, have fun with your Jack. Thank you so much.